The Able to Care podcast is sponsored by Able Training Support Limited, who build partnerships with organisations to develop confidence and competence in their team to promote positive outcomes for all. Find the link in the description. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and joining me today is Peter Hughes, a former engineer stroke RAF aircraft technician, now aspiring author, but also, as he describes it in his LinkedIn profile, full-time carer for his mum, but also a part-time carer for himself. So first off, thank you so much for joining us today, Peter.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome. It's nice to be invited. Thank you.
Absolutely. So it sounds like, so obviously you gave me the privilege of reading some of the books that you're writing at the moment. And I believe it's still in process, isn't it? It's not a completed works at the moment.
Yeah, it's a book of two halves, and I've managed to get the first half done. And to be honest, it's not about caring. A lot of it is about my own mental health and alcohol consumption, mainly. But the caring is being a home carer is what I do now.
Yeah.
And it's had some big effects.
Yeah. So obviously, are you happy to talk about the alcohol side of things? Because I think we will touch on it, I think, because obviously you were having to, I think there was realizations that I read in the book where you were caring and then sort of realized like, I've got to change things at the same time, because I think you were struggling and you're using it as a coping mechanism at times. Have I got that right? I know there was other things from your past, but.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no subjects taboo.
Right.
I'm really open, especially on LinkedIn about the alcohol side of things. And it's been something that's been ingrained in me from a very young age, right from when I joined the forces. Back in 1980 something, where alcohol was, it was a rule. It was, your coping mechanism. It was your reward. It was everything. And I've lived life going forward, taking that as gospel, and abusing it. And I'm really open about that side of me now, because it's really important to let, not only yourself and your family, but your employers, know, exactly what effect they have on you. And ironically, my last job, which has been going on for quite a while as a health and safety specialist, my job was to protect people from people like me. Because human factors and behavioural safety are a big thing in health and safety. But you go through life doing all sorts of stuff which really aggravates it. Home caring is one of the biggest ones. It's probably the hardest job I've ever done.
So do you want to talk a little bit about, obviously, so it's your mum that you care for. I think is she 86 now or older?
85 now, coming up to 86. Yeah, it was a little, about 20 years ago. We had a bit of a family falling out. My brother had emigrated to Canada. Mum and dad didn't like it. I took my brother's side and we all fell apart and went our separate ways. And then some years later, back in December 2008, I got a phone call while I was at work, and it was a nurse from Accident Emergency in Wexham Park in Slough. And I'm in Lancashire, saying that we found this guy and he's got your number in his pocket. Don't hurry, because it's too late. But we need you to come and identify him. So that was the first time I'd seen Dad in 4 years, was going and identifying him on a slab, which was quite sad. And that was also the first time I'd seen Mum in that time as well. And remarkably, the reunion was quite easy. And thankfully, Dad had left a full case of Jack Daniels in the cupboard. So that helped the situation a little bit. But we went from there, and I vowed that I'd support mum from that day onwards. So only a couple of months later, fortunately, we were facing redundancies at work, and I grabbed the chance of redundancy. I let my house out and I moved down south to go and support mum. And at that time, she was quite mobile. Although pretty anxious and didn't like going outside, but we got through it. And we used to take her handbag shopping, but over the years, her mobility and her mental health has got worse and worse and worse. And then her physical health started getting worse as well. We ended up moving up to Lancashire, for me again, but for mum for the first time. And mum went into sheltered housing. And then her real medical problems started, where she had a heart attack, and got pneumonia, and all sorts of other things started happening. And mum's health spiraled. And after about 3 years, we got to the stage where mum needed to go into full-time care.
Mm.
So mum went into full-time care in a care home in Skelmersdale in Lancashire. She was never quite mentally right. She had a lot of mental frailties which stemmed from her childhood.
Yeah.
So she is a challenge. And then things were getting worse and worse with mum's mental health. And it got to the stage, after several other episodes and some falls, that I thought, right, I'm giving up work. Right, smack bang in the middle of COVID. And I said, right, okay, jack the job in. I've got to go and get her and bring her home, which I thought was the only sort of humane thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
In hindsight, it was the hardest thing to do. And if I had a choice, I would never do it again.
Right.
And I don't mean that to sound awful against me mum, but that's the truth of it, because it's knocked me for six as well. So now mum's been here for 3 years, 3 months. Not that I'm counting.
I can see the calendar in the background there, Peter.
Yeah, I know, yeah. There's a chart on the wall. I'm scrubbing off the days.
Yeah.
But it's been difficult, and it's not only mum that's been difficult and me that's been difficult, but the system's been difficult too.
Right.
And there's been a lot of things. And bear in mind, I live in just outside Chorley in Lancashire. So this is not a generalisation about any NHS trust whatsoever. But what we've had up here has been a real challenge, and it's been difficult, and it's taken a long time to get a start on mum's mental health support.
Right.
It took a long time to get a start on my own mental health support as well. And it's just been a struggle, and it's still a struggle.
Right.
And now we're at the stage where mum fights against all medical intervention.
Yeah.
As a lot of old people do. And in doing that, I think it's fair to say she's driving me up the wall. And she's also on lots of medications to get rid of the water from around the body that was strangling her heart and lungs. So it means she's on the toilet 24/7.
Right.
And that means that I'm up 4, 5, 6, even 7 times a night. So there's the sleep deprivation, which I know a lot of other carers will relate to. And it's just been a struggle, and it's driven me into the ground, and I know mum's not happy. But the system really hasn't helped. There's a lot of good people within the NHS, but there's a lot of red tape as well, and a lot of issues that have made things a little bit harder than they could have been. So yeah, there's a lot of frustration there from me.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice, Peter, definitely. And I think that's one of the things I've seen on some of the posts and stuff of some of the challenges you've encountered. And obviously you referred it into the parts of the book that I've read so far. So I understand that your mum's mental health isn't a new thing. She's always, you mentioned there about there's things that span from her childhood. And I think you've already mentioned anxiety being one of the factors that she finds very, very difficult. And did you mention agoraphobia as well? Or is that just, that maybe me labeling something you just said she doesn't like going outside?
No, no, there's agoraphobia. There was it started off with a lot of childhood trauma, which I probably I shouldn't go into because I need to keep that one private. But she didn't have a very good childhood. Although a lot of what Mum says, I have to take with a pinch of salt because Mum is the one that if you touch her arm, she screams. And says she's in so much pain. So I do have to try and judge what Mum says. But I know Mum wasn't happy with her childhood. And then we got to my childhood, and it got to the stage that I was 10 years old. Mum tried to take her own life. And she's never recovered from that. And I don't think I have either. So that's going back out when I was 10. So that's what, 140 years ago.
I was going to say like 10, 20 years ago. But
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. But no, I say myself and my brother, we've had to pick up the pieces from that all the way through our life. And I think Dad did as well. Yeah, it's been a struggle all the way through. And I don't know whether these things pass down through the family, whether it's hereditary, whether mental health is hereditary. I haven't got a clue. But I know I've gone down that route as well. So now, the only way I can describe it for me is the blind looking after the blind.
yeah. Well, it sounds like you potentially had to be a slight carer from a much younger age in some ways. Maybe not to the extent that you are doing now in any way, shape, or form. But if your mum was really struggling with her mental health in those early days, there was probably a lot of, you probably had to be very independent, and you probably had to do an awful lot of the kind of caregiving and stuff. It wouldn't necessarily got the same. Your mum may not have been able to have been the same nurturing mother at all times that you would have perhaps hoped for in your childhood. And that's not to be derogatory to her. I'm sure, like, she genuinely struggled. But
She was good. I mean, this was back in the days where you could get away with it. That if Mum wanted a nice day to make her feel better, she'd keep us out of school and we'd go shopping. Yeah, you're allowed to do that in the days without a £60 fine. Mum and Dad were as good as they could be, and they were both hard workers. I've got no complaints whatsoever with the child. Yeah. So, but Mum was just suffering, and I think I've taken some of that on. I mean, my brother was more like Dad, who got up and got on with it, and I was more the person that was just like Mum, who suffered.
sorry.
You forget about it as a child, and then of course you leave home, and they went to join the Air Force, and my brother was in the Air Force too. And you detach yourself from it.
Yeah.
And then in later life, it comes back to you, and you have to start picking up the pieces again, which is what being a home carer is.
Yeah.
And there's almost like an obligation there, because they looked after you, they brought you up. So now, I've got an 85-year-old autistic child, and I need to look after her.
It is, yeah. I think that's the way many caregivers feel, though, isn't it? It's the that sense of responsibility and that sense of they gave me so much, so I now need to return that and give that back. And I think I think there's some cultures in the world where that is much more normalized than it is in our culture to some degree. I think there is a disconnect for many many children to parents, right? That's it, you're doing your job. I'm getting on with my life now, and I've got my own children to look after and stuff like that. I don't think we necessarily typically tend to connect and care for our loved ones in the same way that definitely other cultures do. So I think,
No, I know what you mean there, because I've got a good friend of mine who lives in Nigeria,
mm,
and their culture of looking after their parents is completely different to ours. I mean, we do it as a last resort.
yeah,
They do it because it's normal.
yes, yeah. You don't move
Um,
away from your parents. You stay living with them, or they come and live with you very much
yeah.
earlier in life and stuff like that. Yeah. Um, so as far as your mum's kind of mental health now, is it purely the same issues that have always been there that have just got worse over time, or is there other, and then the physical health issues kind of adding on to that, or has there been other diagnoses that have happened later in life for her?
Uh, well, getting diagnoses, I mean, physical problems are easy,
Yes.
but getting mental health diagnosis from, particularly when you're at that age,
Mm,
I think you're classed, so it seems, a little bit as being on the shelf.
mm,
And we had a visit from a mental health practitioner last week, and I've been asking for 6 years for it.
right.
And with old people, there's always an excuse why they won't provide that.
Mm,
She's got a water infection. She's been on antibiotics. Um, and by the time the months passed, after the antibiotics have finished, they've got another
mm,
infection. And there always seems to be an excuse, and they're a lower priority, because let's face it, and I'll be quite abrupt here, but they're nearly dead anyway, so why bother? And that's the impression that I get as far as looking after older people's mental health.
mm,
Dementia, of course, is all over the news,
yeah.
and quite rightly so. Dementia and Alzheimer's
Mm,
and all sorts of things like motor neurone and this. It really, really gets a big airing. But mental health, as far as depression, anxiety, etc., with older people, has no airing whatsoever, and I don't feel um, it's looked after as much as it could be.
mm,
Um, that that's the way I feel, and from the experiences that I've gone down, I have to keep saying that this has been in this area.
mm.
So I know healthcare in general is a postcode lottery. So I know there are other places that we perhaps wouldn't have got the same dismissal of mum's mental health.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of it is her fault. Um, I mean, mum refuses medical intervention. We've
Mm,
had it again this week with her physical health and the fact that she can't stand now. And I'm lifting her onto a commode. And we've had the occupational therapist round several times now, two of them. Well,
mm,
I think the first one gave up on us. So we've had a second one round. And mum just refuses to interact with them.
mm.
Her head will go down. She's not interested. She wants me to carry on doing what I'm doing now, and
Yeah.
lifting her onto the commode. And of course, I'm knocking on 60's door now, so I can't do that for much longer.
Yeah.
Um, so mum's a little bit of a fool to herself, because she has refused all this healthcare through her own choice.
Mm,
And of course, she's looked at as having capacity. And it doesn't matter that, I mean, I'm lasting power of attorney in health and finances.
mm,
But that means absolutely nothing. If mum says no, nobody, I could force her into an ambulance, but once she gets to hospital,
mm.
nobody can force treatment on her.
Yeah.
This is mum's decision. And I say mum's capacity is variable. Um, the system says mum's got capacity,
Mhm.
and everybody's afraid to contradict that.
I think it is. I think I literally just did an episode with a lady. We were talking about exactly this. She's a specialist in mental capacity and stuff, and she was saying exactly the same thing, that so many people are kind of unwilling to initiate caregiving decisions because they're still working on this. Well, your mum doesn't have a diagnosis that fits into those typical criteria of infecting the way that the fact that she can make decisions or not. Dementia, as you said, I think it's, oh yeah, definitely. We recognize that's going to impact on capacity. But it sounds like because it's ongoing mental health challenges for her, that there isn't that kind of definitive, yeah, this is something we can label as a reason to doubt her capacity. But as you said, it should probably be based on the functional aspect, being that sometimes she really struggles to weigh up the cost benefit. She's so, sounds like for her, it's a big fear based thing. If she's refusing to engage in professionals, it's the anxiety kind of kicking in around that, isn't it? Has she had bad experiences as far as, I mean, I know in the book you speak about some quite negatives regarding her care especially within some of the care homes that she'd been on. The one particular care home, I think you had concerns about, didn't you? But before that in life, has she had negative experiences with her healthcare profession that's affected this?
Obviously, when you go back to I mean, she was born in 38. So, in the mid to late 40s, things were done a lot differently. I mean, she had her appendix removed, and it's resulted in multiple scars, and she's got like 3 belly buttons where they've literally torn her apart. And then there's things like she had an issue, an infection on her knees, and I know they dressed her legs, and when they took the dressings off, the dressings were stuck, and the scabs had grown through the dressings. So it was a case of rip. So things like that. I mean, Mum's got her legs are really bad and have been infected and swollen. And Mum was scared to have them dressed for that reason. So I understand that side of it. She's gone through a childhood trauma and now just refuses to have or did refuse to have her legs dressed. And in fact, the district nurses have just been round about an hour ago and redressed both her legs. And Mum sat there crying all the way through. And it's not hurting her, but she's frightened of it hurting her. And this has never left her. We're going back to when she was, I don't know, 10, 12, something like that. So there has been traumas for her in the past, which are definitely affecting. And it's like other things like her older sister, Jean, got cancer. And cosmetics and stuff like that weren't as regulated as they are now. And I think they eventually put it down to cosmetics that had caused a certain skin cancer. And it ended up finishing her off. So, of course, now Mum has never worn cosmetics because of it. All sorts of things like that have gone through a childhood, which I guess a lot of people of her age will get. It's a post-war era. And medical interventions weren't as good as they are now. And knowledge wasn't as good as it is now. So I understand why she's like it to a certain extent, but the other half of me thinks, oh my God, woman, you're a pain.
And I think that's an incredibly healthy way to feel sometimes. And I think there's so many carers out there who, when they're feeling irritated and frustrated, they feel a huge sense of guilt, like, oh, it's not their fault. I know, they can't help it. I understand from all their past. It doesn't make it any less frustrating and annoying, even though you can kind of justify it. Yeah.
The trouble is that when you get to the age that I'm at now, you've got this self-preservation thing clicking in. Now, I'm 57, and my dad was 67 when he walked out into the street one day and dropped dead. And I'm thinking, how much stress can I go through now? When is it time for me to say no? And the fact is, when you're doing the caring job, you can't say no. You've just got to get on with it and suck it up. And there's been days quite recently where I thought, oh, God, am I going to last the day? I don't know. There's just a limit for everybody. And Mum doesn't see that limit because she still sees me as baby Peter, invincible, gobby, will look after her. And I'm actually feeling it now. And I'm saying, well, okay, I've had enough. I can't go on much more.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think there is, and we'll talk about, aspects of self-care, but also the potential support or lack of support that you have access to. One thing I did want to ask, when you were talking about obviously your mum's experience with some of the healthcare professionals that, she really kind of resists. Have you found any healthcare professionals that they have seemed to connect with her? They have seemed to be able to help her. Have you found certain approaches work better or?
Yes, and I think the golden rule that I've found out is if you're not getting the right feedback from your healthcare professional, go and find someone else. And that's a really, really hard thing to do because there's, I'm not slagging any GP off or anything, but there's different levels and there's different specialities and different understandings. And as an example, I'm not talking about Mum, but years ago when I was living in Windsor and I come out of my alcoholic closet, and I went to see my occupational health doctor, laid on by the company. And bless him, Australian guy, sat there in shorts and flip-flops, and he looked worse than I did. But he came out with some really good advice, and it was just a case of if you don't feel you're getting the right treatment, go and find somewhere else. And if somebody isn't talking your language, go and find somebody else. And it takes, and I think that's true throughout the whole medical profession. And what I didn't realise then, particularly with mental health, is that you are actually allowed to. And my doctor at the time, my GP at the time, I got sent to see him by this guy from Serco, I think it was. And I went in to see my doctor. I'm ex-forces, so my shoes were polished, my trousers were ironed, I had an iron shirt on, I'd had a shave, unlike now. And I sat down, I said, I'm really struggling with depression and the alcohol consumption. And because I looked okay, he said, what's the matter with you? And I thought, right, okay, wrong answer. So I took it on board and I walked down into the centre of town in Maidenhead and walked into another GP surgery and just said, have you got, I plucked up courage because it was frightening. And I just said, have you got any one of your GPs who is sympathetic towards addiction and mental health? And they said, come and sit there. I'll get you seen in 5 minutes.
Wow.
And we can do that with everybody because there's good and bad everywhere. Up here, since I've moved to where I am in Buckshaw Village, north of Chorley, Mum's first GP was okay. Receptionists were awful. So we found somewhere else, and I thought, we can't do this. I'm not waiting 2 hours on the telephone for anybody. This is absolutely ridiculous. So I got recommended another GP who was really sympathetic towards mental health and older people. And we got settled in at that surgery, and then all of a sudden, a new business manager came along, and said, "Oh, hang on." It turned out we were 900 meters outside of their home visit zone. So they refused
Right.
to do home visits for mum. All right, here we go again.
Yeah.
So I went to find somewhere else, and now we found a bunch of people that pick up the phone within a minute.
Yeah.
And I will say Central Park in Leyland, Central Park Surgery in Leyland, absolutely superb.
Right.
And the doctors are all fabulous. They're understanding. They help us both.
Mm.
They're sympathetic. It's just wonderful. And so you can actually find that, because there's people out there you don't gel with,
Yeah.
and if that's the case, you've got to go and find someone else, and they are out there. People that taught your language.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard anybody mention that before, and I think it's such it's a really useful thing to kind of think about that, again, maybe we take for granted. I think as human beings, I mean, I've battled with changing hairdressers before because I've been, I've been with them for a little while, and then
I,
I've no
I
like
don't
the way
have
they
that
cut the hair
problem.
anymore. Well, I'm trying to get rid of it slowly and surely, as you can tell as well. But whereas I feel uncomfortable going, oh, but if I can't go anywhere else because then I'm letting them down, and I think that must kind of transfer over to the medical profession as well. That I know I've been with the same doctor's surgery for, well, since I was a child. I've got no idea who my doctor is, but I know I'm with the same surgery. And I know that sometimes the waiting times are ridiculous. But I never even thought that I can just wander into any other surgery and kind of go, I'm struggling with this. I don't feel comfortable where I am. Can I talk to somebody here? I think maybe the fact that you were so specific and open about it maybe helped with that in that
Yeah,
incident. That sounds like that's a really nice story.
you can go anywhere you like. The restriction is, for us, the restriction is, will that surgery cover our area for home visit? So I could have stuck with my same doctor, um, 10 miles away, if it wasn't for mum. If you can get to the surgery, you can get there. And the same goes as well with, I keep going back to mental health. But there's something that I actually didn't realise, that with mental health, um, once you've been diagnosed, or once it's out in the open with your own GP, and if you don't think you're getting the support that you require, you can refer to any area of the country you like with mental health. It's in the NHS Charter. And I hadn't realised that, and nobody advertises it. I found out by accident. And for me, that was, for my mental health needs and the fact that I'm ex-forces as well. I got given a number one day by a paramedic, for Pennine NHS Foundation Trust, which are out of my area. But they took me on board and they referred me to the Forces Veteran Service, and a few other places. So it can be done. We've just got to think outside the box. And that's sometimes when you're under the stresses that you're under, if you've got mental health problems or caring issues or anything like that, it's really hard to think outside the box. And nobody volunteers that information for you. I was just lucky to meet a paramedic who was ex-forces.
I think I suppose there's a fear of rejection as well, though, isn't there? Like, kind of, well, if I lose my doctor, then what if I get no other doctor? Or if I lose this OT, I'll get no other OT. And I think it maybe feels like they've got you over a barrel a little bit, of kind of like where you feel you have no choices, as well as the stress, meaning you can't see the choices for the wood for the trees, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky because I'm gobby. Um, so I'm not afraid now to speak my mind, and sometimes it gets me into trouble. But I'll give you an example of, it was only about 2 weeks ago. I fired a district nurse off my doorstep, and it was because I kept ringing them up and saying, "Listen, I'm up in the night 4, 5, 6 times every night. I'm absolutely worn out. Can you give me an indication of what time you're going to come round to see mum? Can you give me a morning or afternoon slot?" And the, the answer I got were, "Well, we've got more sick people out there." Um, and they said, we'll come round when we get round there. Is that okay? I said, well, as a matter of fact, it's not. And they put the phone down on me. Because I thought, hang on, if you can book a parcel from China and get a 1 hour time slot for delivery, why can't you do that with the district nurse, you know? And I know my mum's not on death's door, but blimey, I feel like I am. So just a morning or afternoon slot would be really helpful. So anyway, the next day, 2 nurses turned up to my doorstep and said, oh, have you got a mask we can wear? I thought, right, okay, bring your own. And I said, can you tell me who it was that hung up the phone on me yesterday? And this woman said, it were me. And I said, get out of here. And she's not allowed back now. And all of a sudden it's changed, but you've got to speak up. And what worries me is I'm okay because I'm gobby. And mum's got a gobby son who will look after her. But what about all these poor old age pensioners that live alone? And how are they getting treated? And we haven't even talked about the finances yet, because it is a complete rip-off. And there's some real misinformation coming out there. And it's, I think the only reason mum's alive is because she's got a gobby son. I really, really do feel sorry for all the older generation out there that are on their own, and don't know how to fight and can't use a computer and can't swear at people and can't stand up and fight their own corner. I think it's awful.
It really is. And I think one of the things when I'm teaching around, if let's say I'm teaching a subject to conflict management, for instance, so I obviously run a training company. When I'm doing things like lone worker, personal training, like with district nurses are going out, if you want an easier life, have good customer service. And good customer service, you said, if I can choose when I get a delivery from a parcel in China, or because even most, I remember the days when the service engineer used to say, oh, we'll be with you between 9 and 5. And suddenly these companies are getting lots of complaints and lots of agitation, and their service engineers were being threatened. So they then started going, it'll be between 9 and 5, but we'll give you a 2-hour window on the day, or we'll try and let you know morning or afternoon, and because it just improves outcomes. It just de-stresses everybody. And I think as you said there, it's such a little thing. And for you, yeah, you're demanding it because you want to know, to be able to manage the care for your mum, to be able to make sure your mum is like, I'm sure you have to manage her anxiety around people coming around sometimes and things like that. But you said for the person who is unbefriended, who doesn't have the spokesperson and the advocate like yourself, they are just sitting there anxious for the day, wondering when this thing, if anybody's going to turn up to help them, to relieve that pain or to meet their needs or to listen to them or whatever it is. Thank you for listening to the Able to Care podcast. If you're enjoying this episode, please like, comment and share. We really appreciate all of you listeners. I think you've had an awful lot of navigating to do as far as figuring out, because I see you come from an engineering background and a health and safety background, and you've suddenly been thrown into this world of health and social care. And the jargon and the language and the kind of as you said, the finances and managing the system, I think have all been a huge shock to your system, haven't they? So yeah, how's that been for you?
When anybody starts looking after a parent or a relative or even a child, it's the first time they've ever done it in many cases. And we know nothing about it. That's not our speciality. So what we need is proper information and proper communication. And a few years ago, I'm going to make myself sound like a right tyrant. Another argument I had with Lancashire County Council was when we'd discovered that Mum was no longer able to look after herself in her warden-assisted house. We knew that she needed to go into care. And the information that I got through, and I only discovered this retrospectively, I got a pamphlet to read, which didn't really explain too much. And so I found out it was 3 years past its review date anyway. And social services have booked mum into a particular home for some respite for a month until we could decide whether she could go back home again. And this place was just in the back of beyond. And I thought, do you know what? No way. I'm working in Clitheroe. I'm living in, where was it at the time? Tarleton. Mum was in hospital in Wigan. And I was doing after work. I was getting up for work at 5 a.m. I was getting home at 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. And I was just doing laps and laps of the county. And I was absolutely destroyed. And I said, well, actually, that place is no good. You know, you've got to make it easy for the relatives. Because if it's easy for the relatives, it's better for the patient. So I went on the hunt and spoke to a really nice woman at a care home. And she came out to see mum in Wigan Hospital and said, yeah, we can do it. What I didn't realise was that we've all heard about dementia care and we know what nursing care is. But when it comes to residential care, there's a massive difference between short-term care and respite. And what I didn't know at the time, or wasn't explained to me, was that mum was entitled to 4 weeks worth of respite care, and I'd found another place for short-term care. And the difference is about £1,200 a week. So that caused a little, and nobody ever explained it to me. They just left it for me to get irate on the telephone to them. And but that sort of information, that should be plain English and laid down and, right, these are the differences in different care packages. And then after that first month of mum in short-term care and ringing up that big bill, her care was then made permanent. So it wasn't short-term care, it was then permanent residential care. But of course then you have to give a month's notice on mum's ward and assisted housing and all the bills and all this, that and the other. So then you're paying twice for everything. And so all these bills are coming in for thousands. And I thought, you know what, this is just not good enough. So I started, funnily enough, ranting, which seems to be one of my fortes. Yeah. And the people at the local authority weren't interested. It was a case of, oh, them's the rules. And, you know, just because there's rules there, it doesn't mean they're right. So challenge them, but challenge them through the right way. And nobody would listen to me. So in the end, I got in touch with Lindsay Hoyle, who was the MP in Chorley at the time, and copied it to the Chief Executive of Lancashire County Council. And then all of a sudden, it started clicking into place. And I had a couple of really long, like 2-hour phone calls with the head of adult social care in Lancashire. And he started agreeing with me and saying, you know what, we've got to change that. That's just not right. And I was saying to him what I've said before, what if my mum didn't have a gobby son? She'd be thousands out of pocket. And they sorted it and they refunded mum thousands. And they've told me that they've changed their rules as well. So it wouldn't happen again. Whether that's actually been done or not, I don't know. But you've got to challenge these things because it's such a sticky bowl of custard. And the information is not only not there, but when you do get it, sometimes it's not correct. And the difference now is I have a new contact in social services. She's 22. She's in her first placement. And she's, obviously very inexperienced. But because of that, when you ask her a question, she goes away and finds out the right answer and then comes back to you with that information. And you know what? It's so refreshing. Rather than having some oldie on the phone that says, oh, them's the rules, the computer says no. Getting this young blood in here. And she's been around a couple of times and I've spoken to her quite a few times. Lovely, lovely young girl, but she just wants to get it right. And that is the difference between 6 years ago and now is, it's like chalk and cheese. So it can be done. You've just got to kiss a few frogs.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it sounds like obviously, I think there's probably an assumption a lot of the time that actually a younger social worker or care worker is going to be less experienced and therefore not know. But yeah, it sounds like, but they also haven't hit that stage of complacency and been depassioned by the industry to some degree or another. So yeah, that's quite an interesting perspective on it, as far as you're actually finding it. It's refreshing to have somebody who genuinely cares, still has that passion there, wants to do it right, goes out and finds the information and goes a bit maybe above and beyond, or maybe just doing the job. I don't know how you perceive it, but definitely more so than maybe some others. Yeah.
Well, I think there's also a lot in it as the way you speak to them. Because I've had ranting sprees with social services in the past, a bit because they just haven't got it. They just don't get it. But when you actually meet somebody that you strike a rapport with, and immediately the situation calms, and you can have a proper conversation, they go, yeah, I see your point. So I think there's two things that can improve. I mean, social services, they can improve, but obviously my interaction with them needs to be a lot better as well. That's really hard to do when you've got such emotion and stress going on in your life, and you're looking at somebody and you think, you know, my mother, she'd had heart attacks, pneumonia, C. difficile, and all sorts of stuff, and she wasn't expecting her to live. So when you've got that sort of stress, I think, damn right, you need to give me the right information and you need to be supportive. And that never happened until quite recently. So things are really good now because we found a proper good GP, and social services. This young girl, Lucy, is fabulous. And also a guy that's looking for a placement for mum for some respite care, who's an absolute fabulous mum. And he even phoned me up the other day just to see, are you okay, Peter? I thought, oh, nice one. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it's that type of thing. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's been missing.
Just, yeah, I suppose for yourself, it's just feeling you're not alone and you've got a bit of a framework or a bit of a backup team behind you that are kind of working with your
Yeah,
best interests and your mum's best interests in mind. I
yeah,
think it's so easy for, yes, of course, the well-being of your mum is absolutely paramount. But you know, I think you mentioned in your book, and obviously the statistics showing that carers like yourself save the system over 168 billion pounds per year. So you are the equivalent of the second NHS. Obviously, not you individually, but you're the equivalent
yeah.
of
But
second NHS. So there should be more focus on your well-being and as you say, providing respite and offering additional support and things like
yeah,
that. So
yeah. But plus the fact, I mean, what good am I going to be to mum if I'm dead?
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely no good whatsoever. And you know, there's a frustration there as well. And I've spoken to, I'm friends on LinkedIn with lots of other people who have either done this,
mm,
or are still doing it. And everyone's feeling the same. It is
yeah,
such a hard job. And
yeah,
it's been a BBC News item this week
mm,
about carers and pay for carers, and the fact that you can't claim a pension
yeah,
because it will just get taken off your care allowance.
Yeah.
and things like this. You know, this is the way the system works. The finances side of it is just um, an absolute joke. Mum had a massive increase in her pension last year,
Mm.
in her state pension. Straight away, your rent goes up by the same amount. Or so your rent,
Yeah.
uh, your allowance towards your rent
Yeah.
it increases by the same amount. So there's been no pay rise in this house for years,
Yeah.
because everything that you get extra coming in gets means tested and gets knocked off the bill.
Right.
Um, and so that's another thing, that the financial side of it. And I won't say we're destitute, because we don't. You know, we still eat. We ate today, we'll eat tomorrow. But it, it's real tough, and it's soul destroying.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's-
Not a relaxed situation as a result of that. 100%.
No, it's it's almost got to the stage now where I don't know what to moan at first. You know, it is, yeah. You know, whether it's the level of care, or whether it's the level of support that I get, or it's the finances, or whatever. But going back slightly, when we talk about support for carers, in the Northwest, we have an organisation, a charity called Compass. So it's N for November dash
Yeah.
Compass,
Mm-hmm.
and they're absolutely fabulous in what they do. In fact, I've just had an email through with their newsletter,
Right.
and the way they help us. I'm sure there's other places in the country that do have similar things, but Encompass covers Staffordshire, Lancashire, Cumbria, I
Right.
think. But if you look on the website, it says what they do.
Yeah.
And they have worked with me to get an emergency plan together. So if I were to go out into the street and drop dead, somebody would find a number in my pocket, ring Encompass, and all of a sudden the blue lights would be round here, and mum would be catered for.
Right.
They also offer things like, I can get a free massage down at the local sports centre. I've got
Nice.
I've got to try for that one.
Yeah.
They have coffee mornings with like-minded carers.
Yeah.
They also give you a once annual cash present, which automatically comes into your account. And this year it was £263 or something. Covered the water bill and a garden ornament. And it's to do what you want with. It's just a present for the carers. And it's things like this. So organisations like that are an absolute godsend. And also they're a safety backup as well if anything happened to me. Right. Because that emergency plan is created just to prove you. Grace and Peter emergency plan.
Right.
So if anybody came in here, they've got everything. They've got the LPA, they've got all the drugs details and everything. And this is the likes of what these organisations like Encompass can do.
Yeah, we'll definitely add a link to them in the show notes and stuff like that, and I'll look into them a little bit. My mum managed to get a similar thing, a little bit of like when she was a carer. I think one of the things is obviously yourself, you recognise you are a carer. I think there's also many home carers out there or unpaid caregivers that don't class themselves because they are still working and things like that. That they then don't even class themselves as a carer. And therefore, if you don't class yourself as a carer, you're not ticking the box on the forms to kind of go, yeah, I should be receiving these additional support. So you wouldn't seek somebody out like Compass to kind of go, hey, what happens if I can't do this anymore? I think it's a different mentality.
Well, a lot of people don't even know they exist.
No.
Because you've got to wait until something goes wrong and you hit rock bottom before somebody gives you that information. It's not automatically out there, and that's the beauty of a podcast like this.
Yeah,
because it shares that type of information that perhaps people don't know about.
Yeah,
and when we talk about I go on about Pennine Care with the mental health and the Forces Veteran Service. who are great if you're forces.
Yeah.
But of course, there's another issue. What if you're not ex-forces? Where
Yeah.
does your help come from? Because everyone needs it.
Yeah.
But with the likes of Encompass, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
That they are absolutely fabulous. And the trouble is, to get the help, you've got to know what to ask for.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what to ask for, that you got no chance of getting anything, and that's it's a little bit frustrating. And it's all right for me now because I know, and I can help tell other people that this stuff is out there. But
Yeah.
who would have heard of Encompass?
100%. It seems like to me that sort of every person that ends up having to take on a responsibility of care should almost have like a care mentor, kind of, again, somebody like yourself who's been through it or knows enough to kind of go like, right, so this is what you could do with doing. Here's your plan, and here's the organizations that can potentially help you get that. But as you
Yeah,
said, that doesn't tend to happen until it's already kind of hit rock bottom, until there's already concerns or safeguarding
yeah,
involved or whatever it is, because it's a very reactive system rather than a proactive system that, well, maybe you can stop me getting to the point of being overloaded and put my hands up saying I can't cope with this anymore, if that stuff had been available to me or I knew about it
yeah,
from day one, from day dot.
yeah.
So what would you say has been uh, obviously you're still going through a lot of challenges, and every day sounds like it is a still a fight to some degree or another. Some days easier than others. Sounds like you like a rant anyway, so sometimes that's a good thing for you. What has been most helpful for you, or what could you do with more of, kind of moving forwards?
The most helpful thing for me has been LinkedIn. And not only LinkedIn, because stuff doesn't find you, you've got to interact with LinkedIn. So the best thing I ever did was start being vocal on LinkedIn and start putting posts out there. Not only about home care, but about mental health and addiction. And I think you'll see on my title on LinkedIn, it says Peter Hughes, and instead of saying she, her, or him, or whatever, it says scrambled egg, because that's pretty much what I am. But LinkedIn has been so helpful, and the people that I've met through LinkedIn, um, who are in positions to actually change things, with the likes of yourself, and then there's people like my friend Paula Cashmore, who runs a consultancy, and she's like a trainer, and we have lots of chats about CQC and care and this that and the other, and she's been so helpful. And when you get to know people like Paula, then other people come in, and people that are going through exactly the same as you. I've got a couple down in Eastbourne who I speak to not regularly enough, but we do have the occasional video call, talking about home care and what they've been through, and just nice to know somebody's out there. But I would say if it weren't for LinkedIn, I wouldn't be here. It's it it's been that serious, because 3 years ago, um, I were fit for throwing myself under the under the train at the end of the street. It were that bad. Drinking a litre of scotch a day, depressed, looking after me mum. Didn't know whether I was coming or going. And I just got on LinkedIn and went, help. And all of a sudden, loads of my contacts on LinkedIn just disappeared, and thought, oh, you're on the too hard to do list. But then it got replaced with so many people that actually get it. And I can't praise it enough, to be honest. It really has made a massive difference to me.
And that's because I don't I've been on LinkedIn for a long time, but I'm only kind of now starting to really engage with it and connect with it and finding it as a networking tool. Um, but I don't think I've ever looked at it as a kind of a social media platform for from a sociable point of view. I think that's where I always thought Facebook and stuff like that. But I should imagine there's an element of Facebook is kind of the friends you've always had and probably from the past and school friends that don't really necessarily mean anything to you anymore. You don't connect with them or anything like that. But also they don't have necessarily any of the emotional resilience and expertise that maybe you need to kind of go definitely going through something similar to yourself. And that's really interesting. Actually, LinkedIn, there's a separate community that isn't about networking and selling your products, which I think maybe that's what some people perceive it as. I think it's it's amazing you've used it as a networking tool where suddenly you've just got support and and signposting and shared experiences with many of the people on there. So that's kind of nice to hear. I haven't heard of it referred to like that. So what's the hope? Where's the plan as far as the book's concerned? When are you hoping to kind of have it finished? And have you got that set in your head, or when it's finished?
No, I must admit, it's been difficult because it brings up such raw memories that sometimes it is just too hard to write. And I've been through times where I think, I just don't want to write anymore. I've had enough, so I've just shelved it.
Yeah.
But now I've done the first half of the book, which tells me why I am the loon that I am. I need to start the part 2 and start talking about the constructive stuff with the likes of what we've spoken about today. Because there's a whole lot of stuff to be talked about, both about the caring, but especially about the mental health and looking for support, which I think is a really that crosses all the lines between mental health, alcohol, caring, and this, that, and the other. It's being able to look for that support and not being afraid to stand up and ask for help. Because doing what we do, being a carer for this old bird downstairs, I mean, it's so isolating.
Yeah.
It's a killer. It's an absolute killer. And there's so many people out there doing it, and they've just got to ask for help. And if they can't get it at the first ask, they've just got to ask someone else.
Yeah.
And just keep asking until they get it.
Well, I think there's a couple of things sort of worth mentioning as we kind of draw it to a close. One, I noticed something on your LinkedIn, and hopefully you're happy for me to share this. So I think I noticed you'd put a thing out saying, like, if anybody does need any support, wants to talk, just needing a listening ear, there's an email address that you have posted out, which is aproblem.shared@outlook.com. Is that still active? Are you still engaging in that? Yeah. So I'll write that out in the description as well, so people can kind of contact that if they'd like to kind of share thoughts with you. I think you've opened that up to any kind of mental health concerns or anybody just wanting to bend somebody's ear written in a written form. I take it. Is that why you started that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been looking for something. I've been playing around with a few email addresses, and there's a lot of lame ones out there. And especially now we're 40 years into the internet, all the good internet addresses are taken. So eventually I found this one. And I thought, well, yeah, why not? And I need to get a banner sorted and put that email address up there on my profile. But I think I've no problem with anybody contacting me, but as long as people know that I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not an expert, I'm just a guy with lived experience, which I think is why aproblem.shared is probably quite apt. Rather than, I can fix your problems. Can't, but I can certainly be an ear.
And potentially signpost to a few things that's helped you over the time frame and stuff. And it sounds like you're still learning.
Even for people just to know that they're not on their own, and somebody else is suffering as well. I mean, they might be stuck at home caring for their relative, not getting out, and or looking for 1 o'clock. And I'm with you, brother. Yeah. Yeah, it's I know how they feel, and sometimes just knowing somebody else out there doing that is therapy in itself.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention to you, and this is like self-plugging, I suppose, in some ways, but so one of the things that we're doing with Able Training and Able to Care podcast, I've currently having a membership site built, which is kind of a subscription site, but the idea is it's a Able hub. And it's for paid and unpaid caregivers. Because one of the things I found that I was able to kind of help my mum when she was a carer because I knew about care. I could teach her moving and handling techniques. I could, guide her through the system slightly, talk about Mental Capacity Act and how to manage responding to distressed behaviour when my gran was acting in ways that my mum had never encountered before. And she had me, whereas most people don't have someone like me. They are stepping into this world completely blind. And it's a kind of the idea is to combine kind of paid and unpaid caregivers, giving them a forum that they can access the same resources like moving and handling videos or some of the training courses that professional carers go through, having access to that as an unpaid caregiver. And as well as a forum and access to the podcast and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll kind of take off and offer a similar thing to what LinkedIn has done for you. I don't know whether I'll ever reach the scale of LinkedIn, but it'd be nice if I got 5 people on there. Hopefully I can have a nice chat together. So we'll sort of see how that goes. But yeah, that's the kind of hope that we're looking to kind of move forwards with as well as part of what we're doing to try and offer that better support. So yeah.
No, it's the right way forward. It's so needed because as I said earlier, you've got to know what to ask for, and so having a central hub like that with that sort of information on there, it's so needed.
Yeah, could be good. Well, I'm sure I'll speak to you about it and definitely lived experience being involved in the building of the process. We'll try and I'll get your advice on anything that you think could be useful. It'd be great to kind of get your input on. So, but yeah, thank you so much, Peter, for your time today. It's been great having a chat with you and hearing your story. And I got a little bit lost in what you've done so far as your book. I started kind of skim reading it and just looking at it for background research, and then I ended up like reading a whole chapter and getting myself a little bit absorbed. So far, mate, looking really good. So yeah, I genuinely hope that you continue and get part 2 done, and in a year or so's time, I'll be pulling it off the bestseller list.
Well, I actually sent a copy to somebody about a year ago, and their reply was, "Can you rewrite it when you're sober?"
Right.
So this is the sober attempt.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. Well, maybe they got that right.
Yeah, because trust me, it was a lot worse than it is.
Yeah. No, it's looking good so far. Yeah, there's some. It's an interesting journey that you've been on with it, and I appreciate your openness as well, especially around the substance misuse and the mental health issues. I've done some podcasts talking about my mental health issues and the stuff I've struggled with and experienced in my lifetime. So I think the more people who speak eloquently and speak openly and are managing to do amazing things functionally, able to do amazing things while still finding life hard on the other side, I think gives a lot of people a lot of hope. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing that.
No, well, I appreciate you giving it airtime. I really do.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So thank you as well.